This new YouTube thing sucks. All right, I think we're live now. Welcome to
What an
Corner
opening. What an
Comics. Welcome to Corner Comics. I'm your host, Burkhoff, aka Matt, aka the Young Master Kane, as Russ likes to call me. This is your weekly comic book reading club. We pick 6 issues and sort of go through them one by one, discussing the art, the story, the writers, the people involved, what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, and yeah, just hanging out talking about comics. Russ, how you doing this week?
I'm doing amazing. Thanks for asking.
And new joining us, we have Mikey, who I know from Sifted. How are you doing this afternoon for you?
Pretty good. I almost was late here because I was dropping off a motorcycle and it kept dying on me. And so my wife had to follow me through the city to make sure that I got to the location that I was supposed to. And then she brought me back. So,
I was curious about that when you said there was a big snafu with a motorcycle. I was like, okay,
yeah.
I hope he's not injured.
No. Mechanically, no injuries involved.
All right. So let's see. Let's run down the list of issues that we're going to be talking about this week. The two that I'm bringing to the table: Spawn number 302 and Green Lantern Black Stars number 1. Russ, which two comics did you put on the list?
I have Sinestro, Year the Villain. There's only one. And I have The Wrong Earth, which is by not the big three, some other company. But I ran on it, and they've actually, this is a mini series, but they've started an ongoing after, but this is where it starts.
Yeah. And Mikey, what have you got for us?
I brought two. I brought Hawken number 1 from 2011. And my second one is Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham. I'd really meant to just have the first issue, but all I could pop up was actually the whole novelette. So don't feel bad if you didn't read the whole thing.
No worries. I don't think either of us did. So.
That's fine. That's fine.
um, all right. You guys want to just start with, just go down the list. We'll start with my two, then do Russ's, and then do Mikey's.
That'll work.
Sure.
All right. So Spawn 302. This is huge for Image Comics and Todd McFarlane because Spawn has now eclipsed the longest running creator owned comic, Cerberus, which only hit 300 issues. So with 302, this is pretty monumental. Art, Todd McFarlane and Jason Sean Alexander, who I'm not a huge fan of, but he does a decent job here. Story, Todd McFarlane. He was away from Spawn for I don't know how many issues and has finally taken an interest in the book again, which is really cool. Um, what are your guys' thoughts on this issue? Because I'm a huge Spawn fanboy, so I have pretty much only good things to say about it.
Well, I'm not so much a fanboy. I'm certainly a fan of the animated series on HBO, but way back when that was kind of amazing. Uh, so so much that Spawn has. I know of Spawn, so I know he's fought hell, he's fought heaven, and apparently maybe even boxed with God, and who knows whatever else. So I don't know who's left for him to fight, but this seemed like more like Luke Cage Spawn. Or like I'm
I can
Luke
see that.
Cage with the powers of cloak. And oh, you know what? No, Punisher, Luke Cage, and Cloak. That's
Okay.
the trilogy I see in here. More sort of down to earth, flexing his muscles sort of in a way Luke Cage would, but using guns like Punisher would, and no problem with murder and skills in that area, and then Cloak to teleport people and use darkness. That
Right.
seemed like that's all three rolled into one. Not to make light of it, I'm not a fan of the art. It wasn't
Yeah.
terrible, serviceable, but it didn't draw me into it. What drew me into it is that I already have some interest in Spawn. If I were at the comic shop and looked through it, I might not have bought it.
Yeah.
I might have read it later.
That's fair.
Uh, the story was interesting, but not compelling. Like I need to see what happens next.
Okay.
I feel like though, if this was a graphic novel, this is a good sit down and read.
Okay.
That's sort of my take. Mikey, what you got?
Um, the cover art is very very iconic. Like it seems like kind of the best or like the most muscular, most like sharp angled, most like flaring version of like late 90s, early 2000s
Yes.
comic art. Like it's what was interesting is that that was juxtaposed a little bit to the internal art. Like the internal art, everyone is still kind of like a bit animated but it wasn't like women like this and all the guys weren't like ridiculously muscled and stuff like there was a juxtaposition between the cover art and the panel art. I liked the panel art to a point. Like it was interesting to me, but it felt a little low in detail, like a little muddy, where like I didn't actually get to see much of what was going on. I like the kind of edgy angles and stuff like that, but it felt like a really, really good early 2000s art style, which is fine because Spawn, I also am not a huge, I know of Spawn, like I don't follow the comics. And this might be completely unfair, but it feels like Spawn is one of those comics that hasn't changed much, which is fine. Like Spawn is still Spawn. And as far as the story goes, it felt, because I don't have a huge attachment to those characters, it didn't feel like much happened. It felt like the most that actually happened was, I think, with She Spawn, who maybe lost her powers. Like, I don't know, like, we're not sure because we don't have like Spawn 303, which might have her say, hey, Simmons, I lost my powers. But we don't have that yet. And it felt to me just like setting up for a lot of stuff, but not a lot happening. And just kind of what Russ said, if this was the only thing I had to go on, I might wait till there was more material.
Okay.
But there wasn't anything wrong with it. But the story, at least as for Simmons's part, there was some dialogue about, you know, like I don't have as much access to my powers. There was something that happened back. But it felt like a pretty standard anti-hero goes after scum, like, plot.
All right.
I felt like it was a 90. It's like if this was comic book came out in the 90s, you wouldn't have to change anything.
Except for the inside art, I feel like, because the one thing that does stand out is the dry brush style.
Okay.
That seems to be like something that's a newer trend that I'm seeing. Sort of the.
I see it. I just don't necessarily like all of its incarnations.
Yeah.
The dry brush style. Like what I did to compare, because this is a 2019 comic, and I just wanted to compare it to the detail you could see in, say, Court of Owls. I went and opened up Court of Owls. I'm like, there's a lot of very small detail in these panels. And I know it's a completely different style.
Well, it's interesting that you really like the cover of this book, but not so much the internal art, because the cover is done by Capullo, which he did Court of Owls with Snyder. So, but yeah, it's interesting because Spawn's been around since what, 92, I think was the first issue. One of the plot points that was introduced was the fact that Spawn's power was limited, right? It was on a timer, and he could only use so much before he was entirely lost to hell and gave over his soul entirely to Malbosia. And that was just sort of abandoned, I think, around 98, right? So the comic had been going for like 6 years, and they just was like, okay, yeah, that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, he found an infinite well of hectoplasm, so he can keep recharging or whatever.
But now he's back on the timer, so they've brought that element back, and
Gotcha.
I'm like, oh, finally, like, let's see how this plays out, because I always thought it was an interesting way to sort of end the comic if it was, you know, I felt like it was McFarlane's out. It was like, well, you know, if I have to end it, his power runs out. You know, he uses it in some grandiose way, and then we're done. But now that he's sort of eclipsed and hit this milestone, and the number of issues that are out, okay, now we've got this timer again. How is he gonna, use that to keep the comic going? And so I don't know, I thought it was kind of interesting.
Wait a minute. So are you saying all this time the timer never went to zero? What I mean, and all these 300, how many hundred comics?
I haven't
The
read all.
timer's never going to.
I haven't read all 300 issues, so it may have. But
The super fan My Tuckus.
There you go.
Super fan My Tuckus.
But my thought is, it goes to zero. He's been here before. Goes to zero. He sells a piece of his soul, or something. Yeah, and he comes back a hero again. There's no way this can't have happened before. Granted, he may not want to do it. It may be excruciating, or he may have to get flayed in hell for a few weeks or whatever. So he probably doesn't want it to happen.
okay.
But we already know it will happen, right? I mean, if this is a jumping on point to the new Spawn, and he's got like 3 uses or whatever before it's all over, there's no way that's gonna fly.
So the interesting thing is, it's implied that She-Spawn has stolen some of Simmons' hell power, because I think it's the last page or the page before the last page where Violator says to She-Spawn that those powers aren't yours; they belong in hell. They're ours. And there's also a separate timer, I think, for her that's like shared with him, I guess. I don't know. That's the interesting thing for me. I'm glad that this is still going. I'm glad that McFarlane's still involved.
Oh yeah.
That was kind of why I brought it in. I haven't been interested in Spawn for a number of years because I felt like Todd McFarlane didn't care anymore. I figured he was too busy doing his Major League Baseball action figures to, actually do anything with the comic. And so I don't know. It's interesting. I'm going to keep reading it. I'm going to see where this goes. Hopefully they can get somebody else to do the interior art down the road.
Yes, that would be nice.
All right. Any last thoughts on that issue?
Just scanning through it again real quick. Was the black and white only art from the She-Spawn section done by the same person?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
If not, that might have been McFarlane's work.
Okay.
So, all right, moving on. The second issue that I have is Green Lantern Black Stars #1. The artwork is done by a guy named Zermancio. I've never heard of this.
I saw that.
I've never heard of this artist before. But story by Grant Morrison, which is the reason that I picked it up at the comic shop this week. My overall impression is, what the hell? It's a #1 issue, but I need to read 12 other Green Lantern books to figure out what's going on.
I mean, that doesn't seem actually too out of place for me. Like, except for when they're like doing a hard reboot, like the New 52 or other stuff like that. It seems like there's always going to be like one more chunk of backstory that would make something a little bit more clear. But what you're saying did come across to me like right out of the gate. I'm like, this assumes I know about like 18 different people, four to 6 different cataclysmic events. This was really interesting. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. I'll let you go.
No,
not at all. Yeah.
This was really interesting to me because, and this actually ties into why I picked one of the comic books I picked for today, because I used to be a huge Green Lantern fan. Like Kyle Rayner or Rauner was the one I was reading the most of. So this going back to Hal Jordan is a really weird right. Like it makes me back up because I know Hal Jordan is kind of like considered the OG or the best Green Lantern. Most people like Hal Jordan the most, but I never grew up with him. He was always something that Kyle alluded to as like will I be able to fit into Hal's shoes, or I'm not Hal Jordan, like let me do it Kyle's way, not Hal's way. And so seeing this go back to that, this I'm assuming that Kyle doesn't exist in this universe anymore, or never did.
I don't mean to stop you or interrupt you, but I have to stop you. Did you so you started reading Green Lantern after the Blackest Night story arc?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I read some of it before and some of it after because of how I got introduced to Green Lantern. I got introduced to Green Lantern when Tim Truman was still doing the art
Okay.
for Green Lantern.
Okay. So yeah, it's interesting because Hal is referred to as Parallax in this issue.
Yes, but I had to actually, because I was so confused, I had to look up some articles about what the heck was going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there was a lot of familiar faces, but they were Black Stars. They weren't Lanterns.
Right.
But they acknowledged that the Lantern Corps, or if not the Lantern Corps, at least Oa had existed, but now was desolate, like full of demons. And I'm like, something happened.
Yeah.
This isn't the last. This isn't the way I remember Oa.
So Russ.
Okay, so Grant Morrison is actually currently writing Green Lantern.
Okay.
Right. So there's 12 issues out, and if you want all the prequel to this story, then there's a 12-issue set you could read. So all the setup is there. Now I have read some of it, so I'm already more familiar with the series, with some of the things that honestly make no sense without context. This is only a 3-issue miniseries.
Right.
So this is more like read the Green Lantern series, jump in and read this, and then come back to the Green Lantern series.
Okay.
That's sort of how I see it. So
fair. Like I like small contained stories, like, because and I'm not opposed to going back and reading stuff to get more context. I got trapped in a gigantic loop because I was like, you know what? I never finished the Cassandra Cain Batgirl saga. I'm like, okay, I want to finish that because she was my favorite Batgirl. And I'm like, all right, I want to start at the beginning. Okay, where does she actually pop in? Oh, she pops in during No Man's Land. Okay, or whatever. I guess I'll read No Man's Land. Like, that's pretty big. And we're like, oh wait, there's a road to No Man's Land. So 4,000 pages of comics later, I'm still not actually into the Cassandra Cain Batgirl series because I'm finishing No Man's Land.
And now she's not Batgirl anymore.
Well, I mean, now she's not. Like, but I'm like, because I was like, she was my favorite. Like, I want to see where she actually all came from because she could just kind of popped in for me when I had found the comics, and so yeah. So I'm not opposed to very, very strenuous backlogging to figure out one single piece of information of why it makes sense. But so currently the Green Lantern is the current incarnation is only 12 episodes or 12 issues right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Currently, yes. I don't know if it ends or not, but I know it's 12 and done. So
okay. And it's Hal Jordan, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
So it's sort of a soft reboot done by Grant Morrison. So you get the Grant Morrison storytelling.
Yep.
You get into Hal, and he brings you into it. For me, this book on its own is sort of a dense read. If you don't have any of the background, there's a lot here.
Yeah.
That you have to read into the universe that you really can't do anything with.
Yeah.
So that was. Hold on, something just popped up here. That was my challenge. Is okay, this and this universe and these evil people, and they're on Oa, and so what's happened to Oa, and what, and even the creepy creatures on Oa have their own, like, that has to be broken down.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you got to, you really, there's a lot here that you really have to marinate with some of it so you can get it. And maybe that's good because it makes you have to reread, and maybe that's the hallmark of a good book. I don't know. But it was pretty dense. Now, I like a good sci-fi story with a lot of stuff happening, but this was a lot.
Yeah.
And I know Grant Morrison knows how to tell a story, and I know that Grant Morrison has layers upon layers upon layers in his story. So all his stories can be peeled for later on, and you have a whole nother story going there. And then you see his interview, and you realize he was going somewhere else with it. But there's a lot here that, and I couldn't get it all in one sitting. I didn't walk away with understanding. I wasn't sure if I enjoyed it. Did I enjoy this? I'm not sure. It's not bad. There's a lot here. I'm interested, but am I interested enough to buy another one? That's sort of where it left me.
Yeah.
As far as the art, it's clear art. It's dark. I understand everything. There was nowhere on, and I'm always looking for like some little Easter eggs or something they try to put in a corner somewhere and see if they can sneak something by me. But the detail is good, good enough. It didn't make me think that I wasn't amazed by the art, but it was there.
It was very good quality, serviceable art. Like you didn't feel like anything was not expressed correctly due to the art's fault.
Yes, totally agree.
Yeah, I like the chunky black that's used throughout this. I feel like that's not used enough in comics anymore. Like I feel like some artists are scared to have there be heavy black lines.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, yeah, that's something that kind of shifts back and forth with the times. I feel because like sometimes I feel like wow, those lines are way too thick. Like, and other times, and then there's the people who, I know this is unfair to all the people who were doing it like this before, but what I call like the Samurai Jack art, where there's no black lines at all, and that's just the easiest way for me to remember it. Oh, Samurai Jack art, like no black lines.
Right.
But
yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna pick up issue 2 and 3. I think I will just to have all three and have the miniseries. I honestly went into the shop and picked this up off the rack and was like, Grant Morrison, Green Lantern, it's Hal Jordan. Yes, I'm interested. I haven't read Green Lantern in years. I figured it would be a good time to pick it up, and I think I'm partially right and partially wrong. Might have been a bad time to jump into the story, but
yeah, there was one thing that it struck me, the way this particular comic went, that the mood of it, and this might be only personal to me, but it felt like because of the scale of what was happening with Mew, MU, like however you pronounce that, Mew the bad guy, sort of like back, like he's like trying to bring galactic peace or universal peace or whatever. So there's always that, he's doing it by subjugating all these things and bringing them under one banner, but is he really the bad guy? Like there's a little bit of play for question, like you know he's the bad guy, but there's that tiny hint. But the scale of it kind of made me feel like I was reading like a Thanos-esque arc, but also it struck me like just kind of the scale and ambiguity of like Mew and the things that were happening actually also gave me a slight Berserk feel.
okay.
Because if you've ever read any of the Berserk, like, and part of that was because of the weird creatures that get bloodily dismembered at the very beginning,
Right.
like all those very like centipede, tentacled, mouths in wrong directions kind of thing. That's very Berserk. But the whole scale and ambiguity of like the overlord who is, this is their plan, their grand design. They are so like unpersonally involved, kind of like the in the Berserk. It just personally felt to me kind of like that, because you're like, me as a human, this is so much beyond my pay grade or what's going on. I have no idea how to even interact with this not omniscient, but at least nearly godlike status individual who won't even talk to us. Like, which was an interesting point I saw at the end, like that Mew, like they said, Mew wasn't even saying anything more. Now he was just speaking through sorry, what's her name?
I
The
don't know her name.
I'm not sure what her name is either off the top of my head.
whatever her name is, but she's like, I speak for Mew now, and like I'm gonna get married to Phalanx. Like, and I'm like, okay, all right. It seems like you might be actually planning to take over. I don't know. So there was a lot of questions, a lot of interest, but kind of same with you guys. I would kind of need to see a little bit more of like the whole arc. And it's only 3 issues.
Yeah, this particular miniseries, yeah.
I would maybe wait till they have them all at once so I can. All right. Okay, that was an interesting thing that happened. Maybe I'll go back to normal Green Lantern now. But I thought it was an interesting departure, or an alt universe, as a different article put it.
I remember the Black Stars from previous Green Lantern books. I felt they were like the Nova Corps of the DC universe.
Okay. All right.
So this is not the Black Stars that I knew.
Correct. Correct. That's why that was a big mine, because I'm like, Black Stars sound familiar. They don't seem to be acting like the Black Stars I know.
So, and that was interesting, but I'm with you. I'm going to wait till they're collected before I'm thinking this is a read, but not a buy.
Unfortunately, I'm invested, so I'm going to buy the next 2.
Oh, there you go. Well, thank you in advance for your service.
All right, Russ, you want to
Let
get
us know in the comments.
You want to get into your first issue?
Yeah, my first book is, well, in DC, this is the year of the villain.
Right, that's
so
the
all
whole
the big villains get their own, like, even if they don't have their own book, they get their own, like, one annual book. And this is a Sinestro Year of the Villain #1. I picked this book, well, I just read it, but I picked this book for today because, you know, there's something about how it made me feel. There's something about how it described how humans react and what their wants are and how you can change them just by giving them a little something. Like, if I give you a little something, you'll give me your privacy. If I give you a little something, I'll make you pay more for my Apple iPhone just because I'm giving you some status to go with it, and all of that thing. So that sort of interests me to see how these beings, that's why I shared it. But basically, sum it up, Sinestro is sent by Luthor to quell some super large creatures that are possibly a threat to his master plan. And this is what ensues. So, tell me what you thought.
I'm still disturbed by the way that Luthor's portrayed.
Yes.
But no, I really like this issue. I like that it's self-contained. I like that it feels like an episode of The Twilight Zone or Black Mirror or Outer Limits. It has these characters that I recognize, but the story itself sort of stands alone and apart, which is really cool. The writing was really well done. From the first page, it got me. There's a couple of lines, and it says, "But most people serve simply because it's what everyone else is doing. But whatever the reasons, ultimately they serve because service gives the universe the illusion of order." I was like, "Oh, I'm in. I'm totally into this right now."
Yeah, no, the internal monologue for Sinestro is very good in this episode, or in this
issue. Yeah. The artwork's really good. It's nice and clean. It feels kind of like a 90s book with the way that the action flows. It's a solid all-around book. The microns are kind of an interesting thing. It makes you think, when you think about the scale of the universe and where we're at, it's like, okay, so if there's infinitely larger and infinitely smaller, where do we sort of fit in that? And like the microns existing as, the workers that heal these soldiers. It was really interesting.
The Paragons.
Yeah, my thoughts are all over the place. I'm gonna pass it over to you, Mike.
Yeah. First of all, I did like a lot of the internal monologues of Sinestro. I had a it made me think of that one episode of Rick and Morty where his ship is powered by a tiny biome that is full of a bunch of like bunch of tiny micro people that are like like created a power generator and enough power for themselves, but the rest is actually going to power his ship, and actually keeps going down. Each of those biomes is actually powered by a tinier biome and stuff like and like tiny like different versions of Rick, like through infinitesimally small, like, so that's what it kind of reminded me of. Vastly different tone, but the premise felt similar to me. It was really interesting how it kind of like, and I'm sure this is 100% on purpose, went through the last 60 or 70 years of American culture.
Yeah, yeah,
Like what, like 100%. It was mimicking what happened. Like, I mean, of course, like I'm looking on the one page that they definitely have hippie musicians like playing music and stuff like that for like in the one, but how even in the span of humankind, like that was not always the case. Free time,
right.
like the concept of free time is almost, for the majority of people, something of the last 100 years, 150 years, and it's something that like I'd often kind of thought of like from a different perspective is if you think about the things that we not complain about, but the things that we find the needs to take our time and to dedicate to those different causes or different issues that we find, are things that in other time periods wouldn't have mattered at all, because like, hey, the French are trying to kill us. We can worry about, like, there's no time to worry about that other like issue or whatever because the French are trying to kill us. And it was really cool actually seeing the different flow and the different philosophies that he went through so quickly with like, all right, like, yeah, the one where paragons are war criminals, so like all the microns are protesting and that's why no work is getting done. And like the two guys smoking cigarettes and having philosophy discussions like on a TV screen is like, I just thought it was really cool seeing this story writer's perspective on the situation in America, of how we are spending our time now, and not necessarily putting it in in one light or the other. Like he's not saying, like the writer has not taken the stance of being a boomer or a millennial or the hippie or whatever. He's just kind of presented a 40,000 foot view of the whole situation. And the one line where it's talking about the best way or the most effective way, it was where is it? But it was where he's like, turn the generations against each other, where he talked about that. And I was just like, yeah, I was glad that this was a 2019 comic, because I'm like, yeah, this person was writing for a 2019 audience, and it's written in a way that I think even still 10 years later or 20 years later, or even 15 years back, this still would be a relevant way to address this story.
Yeah.
I think it's not completely dated, like in its approach.
It kind of reminded me of what was the Green Lantern, Green Arrow books that they did, where it was purposefully written to have a social commentary, but it was done in a way that it's still a comic, you know, and that was really cool. Yeah, I mean, you did it again this week, Russ. You picked a good one.
Yeah. It definitely took a turn. Like the ending point of this comic actually wasn't what was going on with Sinestro and Luthor.
No.
The ending point of this comic was what was going with the readers of the comic, which is a cool perspective to take. Question, just because I've been out of the loop. when did Lex become like a god?
Okay, so I'm going to explain it. Here's the deal. In the current storyline,
Okay.
the thing about Justice League is they're so powerful, you need something larger every year for them to fight against.
Yeah.
So a few things happen. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible and put it together. But Luthor has found power. So the Source Wall, you know what the Source Wall is?
I've heard of it, but I've not.
Okay, it's a New Gods thing, and it keeps all the whatever that would destroy us on the other side.
Okay.
It was broken. So since then, new energies and a lot of it deadly has coming in to destroy the universe, and it affects every of one of the major heroes. For example, the Flash has the Speed Force. Well, apparently there are other forces. And so now there's a Strength Force, there's a Sage Force, and so all of these things happen in each of these. So Luthor believes that people should not be fighting for justice. That is not our true nature. We should be fighting for doom. It is our true nature to.
Yeah,
and
I saw some stuff of the doom and stuff like that.
So he has he's got the arch nemesis of everybody, and given them a cosmic power, giving them access to a cosmic power that would make them possibly superior to all of them. So this is a far-reaching arc. So now we have to have justice from the past, justice from the future. So all the Justice Leagues, everything else in this big thing. But Luthor, apparently his arch nemesis is not Superman. It's Martian Manhunter.
They kind of looked similar.
Yeah. So what happened was Luthor has killed the Martian Manhunter and absorbed his essence and become this being with help of a cosmic god, the mother of the monitors, Perpetua. So he is bringing his plan, and everyone has a role to play, and he's given powers to a lot of humans so they can make work towards doom.
Yep. Okay.
Did that was a lot though.
No. I know it's understood. It's understood.
Okay.
Because I was like, he always was of varying levels a villain, but he was never like, I am actually like a cape wearing, like power wielding guy in like your 90s and 2000s comics. So I was just like,
he did have that power suit for a while.
Yeah, he did have the Lexo suit.
That's right.
Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah.
The next book I chose is called The Wrong Earth. One of the reasons I chose it because I'm a fan of Jamal Ingles' art. So, but basically for me, this book is, you get the Batman of the 60s.
That's what I was
parallel with the Batman of the 90s, the darkest Batman. They're having a parallel universe, and they're doing what they do. They're both Batman, but they're doing what in this case is Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man. And then somehow they switch universes. And how does a Batman from the 60s deal with real murder? Because murder never happened in the 60s Batman, right? And how does a Batman of the 90s come here where you can just punch everybody and they're done? One good punch and they're out. But they're not anyway, but they keep getting out, and he's like thinking of a final solution. So this series, which is a mini series, this is sort of the first meeting of those two universes, and it's called The Wrong Earth. What are your thoughts?
I liked it. I think I was a little put off at first because I was like, "What the hell is this tick bullshit?" It's immediately apparent, like from the first few pages, that is definitely a take on 60s Batman, and that TV show. Right. Yeah, exactly. And then and then it immediately transitions in a very, you got the Earth Alpha and the Earth Omega, and it immediately transitions into this like dark and gritty, and it's like, okay, how do these two worlds exist in parallel, and how are they going to cross over? I don't quite understand the plot device of how they're interacting. I don't know if that's explained later on, because it seems like the villain just walks through a mirror and is on the other side, and they don't really ever explain that. But yeah, I kind of got mirror universe vibes from Star Trek, combined with the Tick, and yeah, I enjoyed it.
Mikey.
At first I was like, my question was, is this the first like incarnation of Dragonfly Man or whatever? Like, this is like, okay, so he's not like an established character. This is
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That was something I was like, is he like, I mean, I know there's a lot of like obscure, like there's Squirrel Girl, for crying out loud. Like people think like, wait, that's a real thing. I'm like, yeah, that's a real thing. She actually is like more powerful than you'd think. But I did like the flip-flopping, and it was just a really cool, like I liked the juxtaposition of the two. I'm not going to use, I promise I won't use that word anymore today. I've used it twice already. But I did like the clash of ideas, of the mentalities of these two different versions of the same superhero. And it's something that we kind of get. Interestingly, Spawn is a character that hasn't had a version of a distinctly different tone or different almost set of morals or whatever. Because like 60s technically Batman has kind of held all the same morals because he still doesn't kill. But yeah, the 90s Batman is viciously is a lot more dark. There's a lot more terrible things that are happening, and that you
got somebody in the background.
on just a second.
So, Russ, how did you find out about this book? Because I know it's written by Tom Payer, who's another old school DC guy. Have you been following his work, and that's how you came across Ahoy Comics? Like, I've never even heard of this publisher.
No, I came across it because, I have all my feeds. I have certain people I follow that like a certain type of weirdness.
Okay.
And they keep giving it to me. So when they, whether it's Twitter or whether it's somebody I follow and whatever, whenever they come up with something, I say, oh, let me take a look at that. So I have all my feeds are set to give me all the stuff I love to see and hear. And so this came out of that. And I was like, okay. And I actually been trying to work on a website to talk about sort of Black artists. So Jamal Engel came into my, so when he came up with something new, I said, well, let me see what he's doing. I'm like, oh, I kind of like this. And I do want to see, this is a miniseries. I think it's like 6 issues.
Yeah.
You talked about the plot device. I think whatever the main evil guy is actually sort of a technology genius. The one on the Dark Earth.
Okay.
So he created the device with intent.
Okay.
So, and then he used it when the time came. And then, of course, now we have a flip-flop. So how do you, and I invite you to read the second book, because how does 60s Batman survive in 90s Gotham? How would he, he's still the same guy, same face, everything else.
Right.
How would he handle when people really came up with a weapon that was like, shut up, and start shooting at him, right? Because, no one was really more of a threat more than fisticuffs, right? In 60s Batman.
Yeah. Well, I hate to spoil the end of this issue, but yeah, spoiler warning, he gets shot and is laying on the ground. He gets shot by cops too, which is crazy. Like, they straight up just, yeah.
And if there was something that happened, I have one story of the 60s Batman series.
Okay.
That threw me beyond anything because it was always wild and wacky and the Batusi and everything else.
Right.
But one time, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson were captured.
Okay.
Right? And they were captured to make Batman come, but they were captured in their civilian identities. So
yes, I do remember this episode, actually.
Right. And then so Bruce Wayne pulls out some capsules that he has in his tie. Right? He pulls out these capsules and asks his captors for some warm water. So he gets 2 glasses of warm water. He pulls out these capsules and put in the capsules, and out comes from these capsules unfolding bat suits,
Right.
complete with utility belt.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm thinking this can only this can only happen, and that was where it lost me. Like I was all 60s Batman at the time, right? And then he did that, and I was like, no, wait, come on, right? I understand having bat shark repellent on you. I even will go with the bat swimming trunks. I can accept that. But the unfolding bat suits from capsules in his tie that were dry because they were and had a utility belt, that's when I stopped watching that series. I was like, no, I can't move past this. This is not acceptable. Come on. How much of belief must I suspend, you know?
Right.
But when you see, and that's why I invite you to watch, to read the next issue, because when you see how we get out of this I got shot thing,
Right.
it might bring you there again.
Okay. All right.
Gotcha.
That works.
Uh,
Yeah, Mike,
anything else?
you stepped away for a minute. You have any additional thoughts?
No, except that I'm happy that they can do kind of these experimental one-offs to show like just a concept, like, and to illustrate it without having to use the people you're not parroting but you're alluding to.
Okay.
Of like, this is definitely Batman, but we don't have to do it under a Batman one-off or a Batman three-off of getting, because in a way it's like 60s Batman was different. Like it felt different in the comics than 60s Batman TV show.
Yeah.
Like that. I know they weren't that far away different in tone, but definitely you think of Adam West Batman as being a lot more goofier than his paper counterpart at the time. And
Yeah.
so seeing basically TV 60s Batman in comic, it's just kind of a cool way to approach this. And some of it's pretty brutal, like the definitely not Joker half shaved head guy stabbing Dragonfly Boy, like
Right.
Uh,
I'm just like, oh, that's pretty grisly. Stomach wounds hurt.
Yeah, for sure.
what was I gonna say? So this is a 6-issue miniseries. If
Okay.
you're interested in following it further, I liked. Well, I feel like you said, it's not Batman, but I feel like The Watchmen was a takeoff of Charlton Heroes, right? This kind of thing has been done, right? Because every character of The Watchmen sort of mimics somebody from the Charlton Heroes, and
Right.
I still have an issue with that. DC bought this universe and doesn't use it. I have issue with Marvel for doing the same thing. Do you remember the Ultraverse
Yeah.
with Prime
Yeah.
and Hard Case, and they had an animated series, right? And Marvel bought that, right? And even some people crossed over into the comics, and now nothing.
Yeah. There's a lot of Malibu stuff that is just
Yeah.
lost in the ether.
So
And now Disney owns them, so who knows what the hell they're gonna do with that?
well, speaking of Disney, I think I think Warner Brothers can possibly give Disney a run for their money. I think they have something to match everything Disney brings except for Star Wars. They don't have a Star Wars analog,
No.
but they got Looney Tunes, they got Hanna-Barbera. They can handle all, that can handle all of the animated stuff that Disney brings, right?
Yeah.
Plus they have all of DC, so that can counter the Marvel.
Right.
I think if there's anyone that has a chance of fighting Disney for that number 3 or 4 spot streaming service wise, I'm not saying they'll do it, but I think the catalog is definitely there.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Warner
very
Brothers.
much so. Yeah.
Or and what is it? It's HBO Plus now. So not only you have all that, but you also have HBO.
Yeah.
I think that could be, I don't say a Disney killer, but if you don't want family friendly all the time, you can go here. And so I'm hoping, because I think Disney needs somebody to sort of be the anti-Disney not to take them down. I think they can both coexist.
Just
But
for
I think
just for good competition.
yes,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
we benefit from good competition. But
definitely.
anyway, I hope you enjoyed the book, and feel free.
I did.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mikey, you want to get into your issues? Your first one?
Sure. Yeah. So the first one I brought, like bring up the nose thing, is Hawken from 2011, and the reason I brought this one, because looking through some of the different comments and stuff that you guys made are completely valid. I brought this because Hawken is written and illustrated by Tim and Ben Truman, and those two guys are the reasons I got into comic books in the first place at all.
Okay.
Because growing up, Ben Truman was best friends with my cousin, who I spent nearly every summer at their house, and so and because his dad was Tim Truman, they had gobs and gobs and gobs and gobs of comic books.
Nice.
And so, like, entire water boxes full of comic books would just flow over to my cousin's house, and I would sit up, sit out outside the bathroom or whatever, just reading comic after comic after comic in no order whatsoever. Like, it's just random grab bags of comics or whatever. And so that was at the time when Tim Truman was illustrating Green Lantern or whatever. So I started following that one a bit more heavily because that was the one he was working on. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like, I know the guy who's doing this comic. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And so this Hawken was the first project that he and his son did together, where his son wrote the story and he illustrated it for him. And so, because I know Tim Truman had been doing desperado Western type comics or whatever for a long time, a Scout, I think, in the 80s.
Okay.
If you guys remember, and in the current version, Scout Marauder is what he is currently doing, which is kind of like a Wild West, semi Mad Max, but still like Native American type of comic or whatever, which is very interesting. And like I think Matt said, like, it's not the spaghetti Western type of style isn't represented that much.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to plug this one just because I wouldn't be reading comic books if it weren't for these two individuals, and this is their first project together as father and son. So that was why I brought it to the table.
Yeah, that's really cool, man.
It's a 6-issue one, and I do, both of the things I brought, I do own physically. So that also helped me bring them to the table. So
Nice. Yeah, I liked it. I do like the fact that it's a genre that's pretty underrepresented in comics. I do like Trigun is a comic that I'm into. So this kind of has that similar feel, and I do like the black and white art. The only thing that I don't particularly care for with this this issue or this series, I haven't read the other ones, is how it feels a little unfinished, and it could have used a little more time with the ink, I guess. I don't know if this is like physical paper that's been scanned in and then they put the letters on top, because it does have that quality to it as well.
I can see what you're looking at, because some of the inking and stuff is real good, but then the words feel like they were put in with a computer later. Like, it didn't feel like some of the words looked like they weren't drawn. They were typed in later.
Yeah. So I don't know. It has an unfinished quality that kind of unnerved me a little bit reading it. Like it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is. It almost feels like a proof. Like before they've actually finished it. Like, well, this is what it's going to look like.
Okay, I can a little bit understand that. Remember, also it's IDW, so
yeah.
It's not that IDW means lower quality. It just means you're gonna get a little bit broader of a spectrum of quality. And that's something I definitely I wonder at that myself, because I've seen, and like at least like you guys have probably seen other art from Tim Truman because of his Green Lantern stuff through the 90s and 2000s. So he definitely can do more detailed, more finished art, but decided not to as much for this. So,
Yeah, and if that's a creative decision, I'm definitely fine with it. I like. I think the other comment that I made in the Google Doc was that I'm having trouble with this because 10-year-old me would love this comic, and 33-year-old me has trouble connecting with the source material.
yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I do like the book though. I thought it was put together well. The spaghetti western. I'm curious to see what happens with this guy. Does he just continue to do bad things and be an evil person, or
You'll have to read to find.
or is there
I think it's only 6 issues. Like, so if you want to read through it on that, you'd probably enjoy it. Like, and a lot of your criticism, there's a lot of neat like things, a little off center things do happen, but it doesn't vary too much from the tone set in the first one.
Okay.
So,
All right.
so you take it as you will.
Russ.
Okay. So to me, this was more like a old man Punisher in the Old West. With a little bit of ghost type thing added in, like some extra. If you put Punisher in the Old West and he only had local ordinance,
Yeah.
right? And he was older and been through some stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if those ghosts are real or if those ghosts are in his head haunting his thoughts, this character. But it was interesting as sort of a driving force, like him having, because we don't know if he's crazy or if these are, because again, I haven't read any other books. We don't know if he's crazy or if those are actual existing apparitions that are guiding him. We don't know that yet. So I think.
Oh, I was saying about the ghost. I like that he's kind of resigned to the ghost.
Yes.
It's like, because the Punisher sometimes can be like, I'm being afflicted with visions of my past, like, and it's messing me up. Whereas this is more like, could you please move, get out of the way? You're blocking my shot to kill another person. All right, thank you. Like,
I like a couple of comic booky parts where the blind mule kicks somebody to save him, the new way to kick.
Yeah.
And taking a shit on the way into the sunset. And I like the dog, who really didn't get a lot of play in this issue. But so those things, for me, if I were to follow this book, it would either need to be in a graphic novel format, or and this is just me jaded. I don't know if I'm ready to do a black and white series. I think I might be so modernized and digital that I need color.
Fair enough.
And this is not to say that there's anything wrong with the artist. This is my issue.
Your issue with this issue?
Yes. It was clear. You could see how many teeth people had in their mouth. So the detail was there. The wrinkles were there. So I like that. I felt this was more than serviceable in the art.
Yeah. I would have loved if it was all done in color, like the cover. Like, that would have been beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
And if that were so, I would certainly have been compelled to, not that I'm not, it's just not as much. But if this, like I said, if this was in color, I'm like, okay, I gotta know more here. Yeah. And this is it's a Jonah Hex kind of character. If he was part of a universe, he could drop in and out of time to anyone. You know what I mean? Just come in and start shooting. I know what you're going through, son, but it's better off this person is dead. I could see that. So I did enjoy the book. That sort of summarizes my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Perfectly fair. Like.
All right, you want to get into the next book?
Sure. And this one was a follow-up kind of to this because Batman the Doom That Came to Gotham is a Elseworlds, part of the Elseworlds line of Batman comics. And the reason I brought this one up is because this particular 3 set haunted me for about 15 years. because
Wow.
I found one of the issues, like the middle issue of this thing, in one of those boxes that I got from the Trumans. Read it like late at night, like everything else was dark or whatever. Read this Lovecraftian. Oh, just to summarize for everyone, it is a alternate universe Batman set around the turn of the 19th century in Gotham, but there's a lot of Lovecraftian influence and occurrences that happen in this particular graphic novel set. And so I found the middle one, which with a lot of weird stuff happening. I'm like, what is going on in this Batman? And this was before I knew of the Elseworlds line of comics. And so, and because I couldn't remember, and then I lost the book and I couldn't remember what it was called. And so so I'm like, every like couple of years as searches got broader and broader on Google and stuff, I'd like search keywords like Harvey Dent becomes a flesh door, like to try and find out what the heck was going on. And then I finally found it and bought the stinking comic so that I have it and can never lose this thing again. But I loved the alternate take and I love the alternate history of Gotham, of like where Gotham came from and why it exists the way it does. That is explored in this particular graphic novel set. And I also like, this was a thing I found out later, and it made so much sense. Because the writer was Mike Mignola, who is who did a lot of the Hellboy comics, I believe.
Yeah, he's the creator of Hellboy.
Yeah, and so you can see a lot of those influences in some of the themes and stuff, because kind of Lovecraftian influence is a part of a lot of the Hellboy or the Hellboy universe. And I really liked that blend with Batman. And so and it's only 3 books together. And I think it's a wonderful exploration of a different take on Batman.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead. No, you go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Thank you. I felt all kind of Hellboy vibes from moment one. Not Hellboy, but the BPRD, that whole universe, that sort of I'm not a fan of that art. Me personally. So I enjoyed one. I got to a certain point, and when they killed Dick Grayson, then I was like, oh man. I feel like you're playing with the Batman toys. I feel like Mike Mignola decided to write his own Batman book, right? And right, but basically in his universe, and they had all the characters. Like, okay, I have all the toys. I get to play with everybody. I have the Dick Grayson. I have 3 Robins. I have a Batgirl. I have a Commissioner Gordon. I have, all these things. I got all these toys, right? He took the toys, and then I had trouble pronouncing all the names of all the evil Lovecraftian characters, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, because I try to pronounce everything that I hear in the book, and I was like, I'm having trouble here. Maybe my,
Fair enough.
But it was interesting. It was unpredictable. I didn't know where it was going.
Yeah.
Right. So that is compelling to keep me reading. And then when they killed Dick Grayson, I'm like, can he come back? Because that can happen, right? And I know this is too old a book. He's not coming back. And I got a little off kilter, because first they killed Jason Todd. I'm like, well, Jason Todd's been killed before, so he'll come back and we'll find a way. But I figure it's a certain part we're saying it's more like I'm telling my own story, but I'm dressing everybody in Batman's clothes. So I felt like I don't love Batman that much, but I am sort of, the story was interesting in that it was going somewhere. I couldn't see where it was going. I wanted to follow that through, and the idea of Batman never taking off his cowl, apparently even the Babe was, where is that going? And you get why he was compelled, and he was compelled for a very different reason than the Batman that we know. because it doesn't speak to the whole parents getting shot thing.
Yeah.
The art, so those two things pulled me out. The art pulled me out, and killing Dick Grayson pulled me out. Killing Jason Todd didn't bother me. I'm like, that's weird. I'm cool with that. But killing Dick Grayson sort of took me out, and it's a serviceable. It makes sense. It flowed well. It's just like, I don't know where this is going, and here's a new word that I can't pronounce.
That was a huge thing for me reading this when I was a lot younger. Was I have no idea where this is going. Like, there's no trope that I can try and point a line to that this is going to, or something like, I got to read this just to find out what the heck is going to happen. I do think this ends really well. That the end is extremely interesting. And so, but if you don't end up reading it, that's fine. I just had to represent what I thought was one of my favorite graphic novels of growing up. So
yeah, I agree with Russ. The art takes me out just a little bit, and only because
but it's all color.
It is color. It is Mike Mignola, but he's not drawing this book. Somebody else is, and it was distracting that somebody else was doing his style on top of this Batman universe. That being said, the turn of the century, that aesthetic, and sort of going into it with that in mind, 1928, and thinking about Batman the Animated Series and like the Art Deco, this is sort of Art Deco walked back a little bit and is still almost steampunk to a certain degree. And
it's Art Deco.
Yeah, I like that aspect of it, and that was really cool. It is not a Batman story that's ever been told before. It feels very different from a lot of other Batman stories, which was cool. Yeah.
It did remind me a little bit of Gotham by Gaslight, maybe just because of the era, though.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I also own. I also own that.
Have you seen the animated movie yet?
I actually haven't. I'm interested to see that, like, because I went back because I enjoyed this and found out, this is kind of what Elseworlds is. That's actually, as far as physical owns, I think I own more Elseworlds Batmans than I own regular Batmans. Just for whatever, because the different weird stories interest me.
I want there to be. We had Into the Spider-Verse. Can we get into the Batverse? Right? Aren't there enough Batman, right, that we can really just call upon? And I'm sorry, this is a little bit aside, and I apologize. They're doing an Eternia book, a He-Man book. It's coming out, and it's sort of into the He-Man universe. There's going to be multiple versions of He-Man to fight the He-verse, Eternia-verse, perhaps, to fight this evil. And apparently the only one that can save them is a good version of Skeletor.
Oh, Jesus.
And you want to see that, right? You got and I was like, yes, give me that. I want that. So I'm looking forward to that. But I think because I agree, there's a lot of interesting Elseworlds Batman, right? More, and I find Batman Elseworlds wise more interesting than any of the other heroes. So I think, fine, can't we have something where there's a Batman, there's a guy out hunting Batman in different universes, and we have to get the Council of Bats to come together, the cosmic Bat community, and in that universe there's a Super Batman, there's a Green Lantern Batman, there's a Shazam Batman, all from different universes, because they did that with the Council of Reeds for Fantastic Four. Why can't we have a Council of Bats?
Yeah, the another one I got up there's it's a Gotham Knight, and it's actually like a medieval Batman, like he's in a full suit of armor and stuff like that. It's like he's finally the Gotham Knight, like he's actually a knight now. It's pretty cool. So, but yeah, that's why I brought this one to the table, because it was so very different from most of what people would read, no matter what they were reading. Generally, it's not a story like this.
No, I think I'll probably finish it. I only got about maybe halfway through.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are all the issues, gentlemen. We're coming up on I think 90 minutes. So I think I'm gonna call it there. But
right.
thank you both for joining me, Mikey. Thank you for joining on late notice
Yeah, no
and
problem.
jumping on. Of course, you're welcome to come back. Any final closing thoughts, guys?
Nope, got nothing.
No, I'm good. Good.
All right, so that's Corner Comics episode 4. We'll be back next week, and we'll have 6 more issues to talk about. So on that note, we're out.
Peace.